Draco Malfoy and the Depths of the Mind by Draco will hear about this. Chapter 12. The Truth. As January turned into February, the first Hogsmeade weekend approached. Draco had actually been looking forward to a day away from this hellhole the school had been turning into lately, but when he mentioned it during breakfast a week before the scheduled trip, Harry blinked at him and said,
"But didn't I tell you? It's on Valentine's Day, and I promised to go with Cho."
"Oh," was all Draco managed to say. Hermione looked at him with an expression of sympathy across the table, but it didn't stop his stomach from dropping to the floor. That night he sat down and wrote to Victor. He had only sent him a letter around Christmas, but in that very moment he felt like talking to him rather than anyone else, so he tried to put his feelings down on paper, and when he watched Aquila fly away with it, he felt a little lighter indeed.
On Valentine's Day, though, things did not go quite as anticipated.
At the breakfast table, Hermione received a letter that made her turn to Harry, her eyes gleaming in a dangerous, determined way.
"This is really important," she told him. "Do you think you could meet us at the Three Broomsticks around midday?"
"Well, I don't know," Harry said reluctantly. "Cho might be expecting me to spend the whole day with her. We never said what we were going to do."
"Well, bring her along if you must,"
Hermione pressed, and Draco looked at her like she'd grown a second head. What in Merlin's name was she on about? It was bad enough that Draco knew Harry was on a date with Jang. The last thing he wanted was to watch them at it. Hermione, on a mission, was not to be argued with, though, so she made Harry promise he'd come, and then she took off without explanation to answer the letter. Harry left them shortly after to meet up with Jang, resulting in a historically awkward couple of minutes, with only Weasley and Draco.
"So," Weasley asked after an eternity of silence, "what do you reckon Hermione is planning this time?"
"No idea," Draco said honestly. "It had better not be another secret underground rebellion. Our schedule is full."
"I hope not," Weasley said, eyes wide.
It turned out it was something else, thankfully. Hermione picked them up at the entrance door in the company of Luna Lovegood, of all people, finally ready to fill them in.
"After that Azkaban breakout, I decided that it was time for people to hear the truth about what was happening,"
Hermione told them under her breath, mindful to walk a couple of steps away from all other students.
"Harry needs a platform to state his versions of the events. An alternative that the people can turn to now that they are starting to be dissatisfied with the official statements the Ministry is approving. So I contacted Peter Skeeter."
"You did what?" Draco demanded, gaping at her. "Have you completely lost your mind, Hermione?"
"I hate to side with Malfoy," Weasley said, "but who's right, Hermione? Did you forget Skeeter was the one to start all the fire against Harry? She's the last person we could trust."
"But we can," Hermione smirked, self-satisfied. "Because if she doesn't do as I say, I'll report her as an unregistered animagus. Simple as that."
Draco stared at her, considering. "You really think that will work?" he asked, doubtful.
"All Rita Skeeter cares about is her job and her fame," Hermione sniffed. "She won't risk having me take that from her forever. She'll swallow my terms, kicking and screaming, but swallow she will."
"But the Prophet will never print such an interview," Weasley frowned, "even if Skeeter agrees to write it."
"Well,"
Hermione smiled, waving her hand over to the girl walking next to her in a dreamlike state, as if none of this concerned her in the slightest.
"that's why I asked Luna along."
And then Draco understood. "Your father owns the Quibbler," he said slowly. "Isn't that right?"
"Yes, he does, Draco Malfoy."
Luna nodded, granting him an absent-minded smile.
"And he'll be happy to print Harry's interview. Anything to support him and Dumbledore against the Ministry."
He felt a surge of affection for the odd girl.
"I just hope Harry will really come,"
Hermione noted, worriedly gnawing on her lip.
"We're meeting Skeeter at 12. I'm not sure how long we can hold her there if Harry isn't around."
"Well, if he doesn't turn up, we know who to blame," Draco grumbled, his stomach turning. The knowledge that Harry was out there with Chang right now made him feel sick. He could feel Hermione's eyes on him, but he did not turn to look at her. Both Skeeter and Harry turned up at the Three Broomsticks earlier than expected. Skeeter was already there when they arrived, nursing a fire whiskey, and Harry turned up about an hour before their appointed time without Chang in tow, looking upset.
Draco felt in equal measures uplifted by that development, and guilty about the fact that he felt relief at the discontent of the boy he loved. He was a horrible person, wasn't he?
But they didn't pry, not in front of Skeeter, at least. Instead, they filled Harry in on Hermione's plan until Harry reluctantly agreed to live through the horrors of that fateful night of the Dark Lord's return one more time. He was struggling visibly, retelling some of it, and Draco moved closer to him as he did, lightly resting his hand against Harry's under the table. He noted that Skeeter was watching their movements with shrewd eyes, but when she noted Hermione glaring at her, she rolled her eyes and turned back to the task at hand. When they were finally done, Harry looked particularly worn out, so they made their way back to the castle immediately. Draco joined them at the Gryffindor table, as had become a bit of a habit lately, and they discussed the upcoming article with a couple of DA members in hushed voices, among them Longbottom. Only when Chang entered the Great Hall, completely failing to acknowledge Harry's presence, did Hermione address Harry's rather aborted date again, and Harry fell into a retelling of what sounded like a quite disastrous get-together.
So after I tell her that Hermione asked me to meet the three of you at the Three Broomsticks,
he explained,
she starts acting all weird. The Ravenclaw captain, Roger Davies, was sitting a couple of seats away from us snugging his girlfriend, and suddenly she's telling me all about how not long ago he was asking her out.
"Excuse me!" Draco burst out, outraged on Harry's behalf.
Or how she used to go to that place with Cedric.
Harry continued, obviously egged on by Draco's reaction. Draco hissed, shaking his head.
And suddenly all she wants to talk about is Cedric. So I tell her I don't feel like talking about Cedric.
"Of course you don't," Draco frowned. "That should be the last thing to discuss on a bloody date! Marlin!"
"I know, right?" Harry called. But then she starts crying and saying she needs to talk about it, and she thought I needed to talk about it too. And I told her that I had you guys to talk to if I wanted. So then she jumps up and says, "I'll see you around, Harry," and runs out of the place.
He turned to look at Hermione, whose face was rather pained.
I mean, what was that all about? What was going on?
Hermione sighed deeply, and she glanced at Draco for a moment, as if unsure whether to proceed with what she had to say, but finally muttered, "Oh, Harry, well, I'm sorry, but you were a little tactless."
"Me, tactless," said Harry, outraged. Draco gaped at her, equally incredulous. 1 minute we were getting on fine, next minute she was telling me that Roger Davies asked her out, and how she used to go and snog Cedric in that stupid tea shop. How was I supposed to feel about that?
"Well, you see,"
Hermione explained very patiently,
"you shouldn't have told her you wanted to meet me halfway through your date."
But, Harry spluttered angrily. "But you told me to meet you at 12, and to bring her along. How was I supposed to do that without telling her?"
"You should have told her differently,"
Hermione said softly.
"You should have said it was really annoying, but I made you promise to come along to the Three Broomsticks, and you really didn't want to go. You'd much rather spend the whole day with her, but unfortunately you thought you really ought to meet me, and would she please come along with you?"
"Okay, stop!" Draco interrupted her, feeling livid. "Harry would never, ever actually say any of this. Also, why are you defending her anyway?"
Hermione's eyes were on him now, and they were wary.
"Draco, no, it's true. This girl just threw a jealousy fit over you of all people. She tried to force Harry to talk about something he wasn't comfortable with, and then she threw another tantrum when he wouldn't. And in general, from what I heard about the state, it felt to me like she was trying to fit Harry into a very diggory-shaped mold, bringing him to the tea shop they used to frequent, wanting to discuss him. Harry is not diggory, and if she doesn't get it into her head that Harry is worth dating on his own sake, then she is not worth his attention."
Hermione did not answer, but the look she gave him was very knowing. It made his face feel hot. He glanced over at Harry and noted that the other boy's gaze had wandered over to the Ravenclaw table. He looked very subdued, and Draco felt a little bit horrible. Still, he would not take back what he'd said about Chang. Harry deserved better, and it was time someone said it.
"They're balmy, these girls,"
Weasley said, shaking his head and surfacing from his chicken long enough to share a compassionate look with Harry. It was on the tip of Draco's tongue to comment and tell him that all they had to do was choose the right ones to avoid trouble, but he quickly shut his mouth lest he give Harry any ideas. He didn't want Harry to look at any girls. He didn't want him to look at anyone but him, no matter their gender. On the day Harry's Quibbler interview was released, he was assaulted by owls in retaliation to his statements. Not all of them positive, but not all of them negative either. The impact, though, was probably best to be seen amongst the students at Hogwarts. Umbridge, upon coming to investigate the commotion at the breakfast table, had taken the magazine from Harry, taken 50 points off Gryffindor for the interview, given Harry another week of detention, which had almost made Draco speak up if Hermione hadn't stepped on his foot, banned him from Hogsmeade for the remainder of the school year. The Quibbler had subsequently been banned from the school in Educational Decree number 27, but all that did was make sure that every last student got their hands on a secretly transfigured copy. It was the talk of the school, and it seemed not only a few of them were inclined to believe Harry's version of the story. One of the first to come and face Harry about it was Finnegan, and Draco could tell how happy that made his friend. Finnegan immediately joined the DA, much to Draco's admitted suspicion, but he was, as always, hopelessly overruled. Another person who tried to make up with Harry in the aftermath of the interview was Chang. To Draco's surprise, though, this didn't go over as well with Harry. "Maybe you're right about her," Harry told him with a deep frown one night after working, rather pointlessly in Draco's opinion since Harry was wrung out after Umbridge's detention, on Harry's acclimacy. "I mean, apart from Quidditch, we don't have anything in common. And that date, it really did seem a little like she wanted me to be someone I'm not."
"I'm sorry,"
Draco muttered.
"Maybe I shouldn't have—"
"No."
Harry shook his head.
"You were honest."
Draco didn't respond. He wasn't so sure if he was honest as much as bitter.
Maybe he figured it was a mix of both.
The edition with Harry's interview quickly became the most sold editorial of the Quibbler in existence.
Umbridge, though, wasn't the only one at Hogwarts who was livid about the interview. Draco had known that when Harry had listed the names of the Death Eaters present the night of the Dark Lord's rebirth, that there would be hell to pay for this one way or another, but when he entered the dormitory the evening after the magazine had been published, Draco found himself slammed against the cold, unforgiving stone wall. It took a moment for him to gather his wits. He could taste blood in his mouth.
"You filthy little traitor!"
Nott was already yelling, and Draco was fumbling for his wand.
"It's bad enough that you'd sell out your own flesh and blood like that, your own father. The shame! But you sold out all of our fathers, too.
You should have considered that before you and all your little friends went public, Malfoy."
"We did what we had to do,"
Draco ground out, his fingers clenching around his wand. He turned to glower up at Nott, who was towering above him, Crabbe and Goyle at his shoulders.
"We did what was right."
Crabbe growled and reached out for him, but this time Draco was prepared. He sent a Petrificus Totalis at Crabbe, a Levicorpus at Goyle, and then he was hit with an Expelliarmus and found his wand flying from his hand and right into Nott's. He stared in horror as Nott sneered, stepping closer and pressing his own wand against Draco's throat.
"You're scum," Nott spat. "You and Potter and all of your merry troop. And I can't wait till I don't have to look at your ugly face again every single day. I just hope I'll be the one who gets to do it in the end. Who gets to kill you. I know Potter's safe for the Dark Lord, but as far as I know, no one has tabs on you yet. Maybe I'll be so lucky."
That was the moment the door opened and Zabini stepped into the dormitory. His eyes fell on Crabbe's stiff figure on the floor first, and then he glanced at Goyle suspended in the air before he took note of the position Draco and Nott were in. Zabini acted faster than Draco would have thought possible. He disarmed Nott in a matter of seconds, and Nott watched with an indignant cry as Zabini caught both his and Draco's wands from the air. "What the heck, Theo?" Zabini spat.
"This is none of your business," Nott yelled.
"It's my business if it's happening in my dormitory."
Zabini rolled his eyes.
"Now step away from Malfoy, or do I have to call Professor Snape?"
"What right do you have to boss me around?" Nott hissed, rounding up on him. "You're not even a prefect. You're a no one."
"Funny you should mention prefects, seeing that you just threatened one," Zabini drawled. "How does it work in cases like these? Does Malfoy get to punish you, or do I have to get Pansy to do it? She'd step up gladly, don't you worry."
"Be careful," Nott growled. "The game you're playing is dangerous. You might end up on the wrong side."
"I don't take sides," Zabini said flatly. Now get out of here if you know what's good for you. Zabini held out his wand, and Draco knew it was a peace offering. Zabini wouldn't tell if not left without making a fuss. Not glowered at him, and after a long moment of silence, he wordlessly took the wand and the offer. He cast 2 quick spells at Crabbe and Goyle, releasing them before heading for the door.
You were lucky this time, Malfoy. Not hissed, but remember what I said.
And with that, he left. Are you all right? Zabini asked the moment the door closed behind them, crossing the distance between them and holding out a hand to help him to his feet.
Yes,
Draco muttered, taking it gratefully as he stood.
Thanks for that.
No problem. Zabini sighed. I'm afraid it won't keep him off your back forever, though. He frowned. You're bleeding. You should see me at Pumphrey.
I'll be fine.
Draco waved him off. If Harry heard that he'd been to the hospital wing, there'd be hell to pay. All right. Zabini rolled his eyes. At least let me cast the healing spell, then.
Okay,
Draco smiled.
Give it a go.
Zabini pointed his wand at the wound at Draco's temple, and Draco forced himself not to flinch away. Then Zabini muttered the spell, and Draco felt the skin knit itself back together. It's still a little red. Zabini made a face, but it might be gone by the morning. He repeated the movements on the wound on Draco's upper lip.
Thank you,
Draco said again.
I really appreciate it. I know it's hard to stand up to not.
Zabini shrugged, a frown on his face. He needs standing up to, Zabini said softly. No more than ever. But I guess you of all people would understand that. Draco blinked, not quite having expected that answer. He opened his mouth, scrambling for a response, but Zabini had already turned around, opening his trunk. Oh, right, he called, throwing him his wand. Draco got it. Here, take care of yourself. You're kind of an important figurehead in this whole upcoming war.
Come again?
Draco said, quite taken aback. Well, Zabini smiled, looking at him over his shoulder. You're the Death Eater's son who changed sides. A Slytherin nonetheless, of pure blood. Do you have any idea what an inspiration you could be to people? Draco didn't answer. He'd honestly never thought about it. Just don't get killed anytime soon, Zabini snorted. It would be quite a waste. The next morning, Harry had more news of the Death Eater variety. In the dream I had, Harry told him and Hermione in hushed tones as they walked the grounds with sandwiches instead of having breakfast in the Great Hall. Voldemort had a conversation with Rookwood, one of the Death Eaters who escaped from Azkaban, and he told Voldemort that Bode would have been unable to remove what they were after from the Department of Mysteries, but Avery told Voldemort that he would be able to take it, so Draco's dad... Harry threw him a quick, hesitant look, and Draco's stomach fell at the mention of his father. Put him under the Imperius Curse, and forced him to retrieve whatever they are after. He fought very hard against the curse, but they made him go anyways, and naturally, he failed. That's why he was in St. Mungo's.
Who's Bode?
Draco injected.
We met him at St. Mungo's, Hermione explained, when we visited Mr. Weasley, but got lost and ended up on the Janus Sticky ward. He was in the same room as Lockhart. On the day of the mass breakout, there was an article in the Prophet that he had died. Someone had sent him a devil's snare seedling as a pot plant, and it strangled him. Apparently he had been getting better,
So the Death Eaters needed to silence him.
Draco finished her sentence, feeling sick to the bones. He wondered if his father had been involved in that too, if he had sent that plant, or if he had asked one of their house elves to do it.
But you shouldn't have seen this at all, Harry,
Hermione said quite abruptly, fixing him with a stern look. What? Harry asked, clearly confused.
You're supposed to be learning how to close your mind to this sort of thing, she continued, turning on Draco now. I thought you were helping him.
I am,
Draco assured her, a little defensively.
It's just a little hard to find the time and energy in between homework and the DA and attention, and, well, you'll just have to try a little harder, don't you?
Hermione said firmly. Both Harry and Draco were so angry that they barely spoke a word with her for the rest of the day.